Brittany Benrath is in the house, and she's going to help us. Thank you so much for being here and for starting. So we are live and in person. Okay, good evening. This is our third week on this topic, this kind of idea of sacred stewardship. And as you will remember, the first couple of weeks, I just kind of set a biblical and theological foundation for the reason why we're having these conversations. It's not light and airy and cheery, but they're important. And they are as valuable a conversation as we'll have for ourselves and for our families. And so as we are talking tonight, at any point, if we're going to have a dialogue with Steve, but if you have a question for me or something I say is confusing, stop me, raise your hand, and we'll pull it apart. Okay? So this week we are talking about kind of end-of-life planning and funeral planning. The second week, last week, we talked about wills, trusts, and bequests, which is part of planning for the end of life as well, and probably one of the more valuable things for just the ways in which your family will deal with all of the earthly things. But then this conversation is both earthly but also eternal, right? This is funerals for preachers is a responsibility and a right that is one of the most important things we do. Because as Christian people, our job is to walk each other home. And that is what we do when we gather in worship at the end of life. When we celebrate a life and when we memorialize someone. And that's what we're going to be thinking about tonight. So, you all should know Steve and Stacy Gant. Steve, you've been a member here for how long? A long time?
Since I was 10 years old.
Yeah, so a long time. And he's going to come in a minute and talk to us about some of the things. And I'm going to set the stage just for a minute, Steve. Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 2 says, "There's a time for everything. A time to be born and a time to die." And one of the promises is of life is that there's a couple things that are certain, right? What are they? Death and taxes, right? And so while I filed an extension, I'm going to be finishing mine very soon. My taxes, and Scripture talks about how the end of life should be seen in so many ways. And just like we plan for weddings, births, and retirements, so many people leave the end of life decisions unwritten and undecided. Now, my mother I've mentioned this several times, my mother has said some things aloud in front of me that she hopes will happen at her funeral, but I don't know that they've been written down. And so it's presumptuous of her to trust my memory. Jennifer will tell you. So, as we think about this idea tonight, I want us to think about what if planning for our death could be an act of both faith and love, but also clarity for those who will try to help us have our wishes and follow. So that's why we're having this conversation. So I want to offer a prayer as we begin. Then I'm going to share just a couple of key truths and we'll have a conversation. Let's pray. God of all seasons, help us face the mystery of death with courage and grace. May we live wisely and prepare faithfully. We pray all these things in the name of Christ. Amen. So, why does funeral planning matter? End-of-life decisions, much like we talked about, having the medical power of attorney last week, they are clarifying, and they are a gift to those who will help you. So end-of-life decisions aren't a morbid thing, they are a merciful thing. You are helping offer a gift to those who will follow through on your wishes. And what you want matters, right? The last thing you want to do, the last thing I would want for any family is for one sibling to take over for a parent's funeral and do something that the parent never wished for, right? It's kind of like young parents and parents of young children sending them to every baseball camp in the world because I wasn't a good baseball player but wanted to be. I mean, we want your wishes to come to fruition. So planning helps your family know your story, your values, and that the ways your faith was lived out be reflected in the way you're remembered in the funeral. And then a clear plan is a gift to grieving loved ones. Again, I mentioned this at the end of last time, and it's the funeral form. Stephen knows do masterful work when they sit down with a family who's not thought about this, but many of the questions that are in this service prearrangement form that the church has put together are questions that if you walk in, I guarantee you walk in with this form filled out for a loved one and hand it to Steve Dan, he's going to be grateful. Because much of the work that they have to sit and walk you through is already done and decided. And it will be helpful not only for them, but also, not only a funeral home, but also for the church. So, it relieves guesswork and stress in a time that becomes very stressful, right? I was with a widow in the last month, and she was remembering losing her husband, and she said, I was told not to make any big decisions really quickly. I mean, having to make these decisions in the moment, they're big. And it can be hard if you don't already know what your loved one wants. So, it's one of the reasons we're together tonight. Have you ever helped plan a funeral? Have any of you had to help a family member or someone through that process? You can remember it probably was not easy, right? What made doing something like that meaningful? Does anybody have something they would be willing and able to share about helping someone plan that was meaningful or difficult?
If you've done it, you have some idea of what works and what doesn't work.
That's right.
Yeah.
If George said if you've done it, you've got ideas of what does work and what doesn't. And if you've helped, one of the things as a minister I help families think about is obviously if a family wants cousins and brothers, multiple people to speak, one of the things I try to say is it's not a hard and fast rule, but there's kind of a general social contract that we have an hour to accomplish our goal, right? That you've probably been to funerals that have lasted much longer than an hour and thought, oh my goodness, it's been 75 minutes. You're not thinking about what's going on. You're thinking about 15 minutes over time, right? And so, while there isn't a hard and fast rule, it's good stewardship, right? It's good stewardship of those who gather to be, to kind of covenant to that hour mark. And I always help families who say, well, Cousin Eddie and Sue and, Brother Bobby all realize that if you get up there unprepared, you think 2 minutes, but it's actually 12, right? And help folks think through that, because you want it to be meaningful. You want it to be thoughtful, right? And not difficult. And so if you've experienced it, and you know that you can help folks along, it's a beautiful gift, right? It's a beautiful gift. Now, we're in a tradition at First Baptist, and we've experienced lots of funerals in this place and in this town, and funerals look different in lots of different places, right? Traditions matter. I went to a funeral in Canton, Georgia, funeral of a really good friend of mine. Her father passed away, and they had 4 preachers, and they came from it was a Baptist church, but it was more like a Pentecostal church, and so it was just a different experience, right? Every tradition has difference, but when we help plan and when we're thoughtful, it can be helpful. So, Steve, come talk to us a minute. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and help us think through some of this. You've walked with countless grieving families. Explain the difference in the experience for you all and even for the family when someone has made clear wishes.
Well, and Pastor John, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for giving us a chance to have a open forum like this to explain what we do, and I can't tell you how important it is to families when so many decisions that need to be made in such a critical time, and we see so many families that have come in without any plans, and they have been 2 weeks with a loved one at hospice, and they have just really been mentally and physically exhausted, and then they have to sit there and look at us, and we are and inundated with question after question that we have to, not only for planning the service, but there's things that we are obligated to do, such as filing a death certificate, and we only have a certain amount of time to do that. And so when the logistical or the factual information is documented, we see, because a lot of times we'll tell families, just things, the most critical information is things that never change, your date of birth, your place of birth, your parents' names, and just having that information somewhere, so many folks don't know their mother's maiden name, and so it's just such a valuable gift, and can take some of the burden. I'm not going to say it takes all, but it takes a lot of the burden off of your family and the ones that are left to make those critical decisions.
So are there decisions that happen at every conversation you have that we don't think about, people don't think about till the last minute? What are some of those things?
Well, I have a colleague of ours, he posted on Facebook just a week or so ago, and it was ironic that he did, but I don't know it's hard to say what what COVID did to things like service. And my dad was, he passed away right before COVID, but he always had a saying that, however the church goes, so goes the funeral. So when folks start getting away from church, they're going to start getting away from the funeral. And we've seen that with COVID. you know, there's so many that are, well, I don't want a service. I don't want I don't want to put y'all through that. And there was a, that he put on Facebook, he said, if you're telling your family no funeral for me, remember your funeral begins their healing, not yours. So, you know, it's so vital to the family, the next of kin, and we just see that when you come in and you have an opportunity to sit down and make those decisions with a clear mind, and we don't have to know anything about it. I mean, you know, it could be something that, a discussion you have with your family, and you could put that in somewhere for future reference, or with the church, like the information that you've provided. But just giving the family, your family, something that lets them know what your wishes are is just can make a huge difference.
And I think one of those ripples from COVID had to be the fact that there were people who passed away and were not able to be buried because of the time, because of the sickness.
That's right.
And then people were having to wait, and so it sets a new normal for lack of
Right.
And it did, but again, I want to echo the sense that you know, as faithful people, one of those images and one of those rituals, much like baptism, much like communion, the ways in which we walk each other home is so important. And being able to have that, it's a fence post, for lack of a better phrase, right? It is there's the opportunity to have finality. There's opportunity for it to be a pivot point. Not that we're ever pivoting away, but it's an hinge point, right? And it is a fence post, the funeral,
Right.
that you can't replace otherwise. It really is. So, any other decisions that people don't think about until the last minute that you can think of?
And, you know, I think the way that you would want to be remembered, whether with the place of the service, the music, obituary information, you know, some folks are somewhat humble and say, well, I just want the very basic biographical information, education, occupation, memberships, list our family. And then you have some that you'll see obits that go, or rather lengthy, that says they were a member of Sam's Club, and, you know, things like that that are definitely, it gets a little bit too much. But yeah, so you know, that type of information, and having that, because nobody knows it better than you. And so that is very helpful, informative, and you want it to paint that picture. You know, those are just, you know, skimming the surface of the types of, you know, things that, flowers and, I mean, there's a litany of things that you would want to consider.
Right. And
doing that in with a clear mind is very helpful.
Yeah.
For sure.
I liken it to advice I used to give to parents of teenagers. As they were aging in, I would say, okay, I know this sounds sadistic, but what I want you to do is sit down and I want you to think of every terrible choice your children make. Every terrible choice. I'm talking about drug arrest, I'm talking about DUI, I'm talking about pregnancy before marriage, I'm talking about all the how can making a decision about punishment in the heat of the moment, I mean, it's no different. You are embroiled in an emotional struggle, having lost someone, and you've got to make really important decisions. So clarity early on matters. What are some ways people can personalize a funeral to reflect their faith and life story?
Yeah, I think you have the opportunity, again, going back to selecting the location, the music, who will officiate the service. If you're a veteran, do you want military involvement? And a lot of folks don't realize that what are the options that are there that for like through the military, and every honorably discharged veteran is entitled to the flag and the branch of service that they were a member of, someone to come forward and present that flag to the next of kin and play taps. If you are a retired veteran, you get full honors, which is the full honor guard, rifle team, and so forth. So, there's a litany of things that they will provide that a lot of veterans may not be aware of. My uncle is an Air Force veteran, and when he was discharged from the Air Force, I mean, he hadn't really looked back. He's not involved with American Legion or anything like that, so he really doesn't know what options and things that they would provide if his family wanted them. So, you see a lot of people. When I was growing up, a 7 to 9 visitation was the norm, but you hardly ever see a 7 to 9 visitation anymore. It's an hour before or 5 to 7 the night before, and there's times when immediately before is very fitting, and sometimes it's you may want to reconsider. So, and a lot of we see families that say, "Well, I want a graveside, but I want 3 preachers, 2 songs, and a 45-minute," and it doesn't really coincide with a graveside service. So not in 95-degree or 35-degree weather, especially. So sometimes in theory those things sound like they are the perfect fit, but once you look at the full picture, it may not be. So.
What about advice you might give to people who are hesitant to talk about this with family? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would definitely. I would ask open-ended questions, especially when you really don't have to have that conversation. I would ask, what have you been to a service lately? What were your thoughts about that service? What was kind of the takeaway from that service? My dad was, he lived and breathed the funeral business, and he didn't have anything really written down, but he would periodically say, "Now, when something happens to me, this is what," and he would kind of say, but after he got sick and right at the end where we knew that it was close, that was it. He did not want to talk about it. He didn't, this is someone who had spent his life, right, but that was it. He did not mention, when he knew the end was near and was told it's near, he did not say, "This is what I want, this is what," it was, And my mother, after he passed away, didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to make any decisions. She said, y'all just do it. Y'all just do it. Y'all just do it. And so it was a completely opposite reaction that I thought I would have from either one of them. But she told my brother and I, y'all just, you handle it, you pick the music, you pick the day and the time. I'll be there, but you pick the clothes. And I mean, she just, that was decision she did not want to make. So, but I think when you are, riding in the car, or just having a general conversation is the best time to, because you don't have to have that conversation. It's just more of a open-ended, casual conversation that you can have.
Right.
So,
Good word.
yeah, but.
Good word. Are there financial or legal advantages to pre-planning funeral arrangements?
Yeah, but one of the things that put pre-planning, so to speak, on the map, maybe I would say approximately 30 years ago, was when families were faced with putting a loved one in a nursing facility, like a parent or someone they had guardianship over or conservator over, and they would go to basically let them, go to a nursing home, and you have to put all your assets out on the table. And the government says you have to spend your money before Medicare, Medicaid will step in and provide benefits. And a lot of care workers were saying, well, you need to spend down so they will qualify for Medicare, Medicaid benefits, so that they will assist in the in any nursing home costs and things like that. So we would have so many families that say, yeah, we're gonna have to do this anyway. We need to put these funds somewhere where it's protected. And you can do that through by planning their funeral. You can funeral, casket vault, or whatever types of services you want, put it in an irrevocable contract, and there's no way that they could ever say it's a liquid asset. And that's one of the ways that it's beneficial. And some folks just like knowing that it's taken care of. And if you come in and you just want, a lot of folks just give us information, and we'll just put that in a file. Some say, I want to go ahead and pre-fund, and that way there's no issues when the time comes. We put those funds in like an escrow account. They're held in we can't just take those, put them in our bank account, and we have to put them in some type of an account with and they're regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs. They have to stay there until the time of need. So that way, if we're proud to say we've been a part of Greenwood for over 135 years, but that doesn't say we're going to be here, So if something ever did happen, you're not bound to Blith. You can take that somewhere else. And so that's why those funds stay somewhere until they're needed. And you can be as some people want to take care of everything. They say, well, I want to piecemeal it. I want to go ahead and just take care of all the service costs, and I'll come back and do and you could, there's several ways you can tailor that to fit your needs.
Gotcha.
So, and in the folders that we have, there is a brochure that from our state association printed those, and it tells about different types of revocable versus irrevocable contract, guaranteed versus non-guaranteed. And if it's a guaranteed contract, there's however many years down the road when it's needed. If it says it's guaranteed, that means that the funeral home can't come back and say, well, it didn't keep pace with inflation, so you owe us the difference. The funeral home guarantees that whatever is pre-funded, that there's no way we could come back and say that the state or the next of kin owes the difference. So.
Does it ever work out to refund some of that? Don't do everything?
There's a lot of times, if not everything in the contract is utilized, it would be returned to the estate. And we have an opportunity, or some folks say, well, I've got a life insurance policy that I'll just put, and it may be twice as much as what the funeral will cost. So obviously, at the time of death, whatever the death claim is, if there's any overage, that would come back to the estate, if there is any overage, or if it all wasn't utilized. So.
What percentage of people are choosing cremation these days rather than the traditional burial?
I would say, well, in South Carolina, it's about 40%.
Choose cremation?
Right, 40%, yeah. So, and obviously it has increased.
That's trended up over the last.
Right, it'll stabilize, but we hadn't really seen a decline in it. Right. But it's about 40%. Now, California, Florida, 75%, I would say. But the Bible Belt would be more still hanging on to that traditional sense.
What other questions do you all have? Are there any other questions you'll have for Steve?
If you choose cremation, you can still do a burial with a marker.
Yes, sir. You can. You can have a burial just as if it was casketed remains.
And if one spouse chose burial and one chose cremation burial,
Right.
that's permissible?
Sure. Yeah. And you can utilize one grave. And we have seen where the one family member would want cremation, and if they happen to, if they go before the other spouse that wants more of a traditional burial, we can just put those remains in the casket, or so yeah, there's certainly that's an option.
Gotcha.
So.
Any other questions? Yes, Jim?
One of the questions I saw here had to do with out-of-country death, and then also mentioned out-of-state.
Right.
During my lifetime, I was never worried about out-of-country because they no longer get me home.
Right.
Without a problem.
Yes, sir.
Unless you were retired and then you were on a trip, and that was a different problem. However, recently I heard of a situation that problem getting out of state back to South Carolina. Is that an issue?
There used to be, you couldn't take an unembalmed body across state lines, and that has been lifted. That was lifted quite some time ago. there is times when either a medical examiner or the facility where the death occurs may, for, I guess, medical purposes or questionable deaths, that it may be you have to wait till all that is clarified. It's very similar, like, and I'm a big JFK buff, and when he was shot in Dallas, you know, he wasn't supposed to leave Dallas as quick as he did, because it was obviously a murder, and it was an assassination, and the coroner or medical examiner has the full control of that. Until he releases it, then, I mean, it's their property. It's a property of Dallas, Texas, but they took him anyway. So a lot of times that may be an issue, is a medical examiner, or, you know, there may be some legalities there that they won't release the deceased until all that is clarified. So we've seen that. In some instances, it doesn't happen very often. And obviously we go to Augusta, to the VA in Augusta, or on somewhat of a frequent basis, and it's not a problem. So, but if you die out of the country, it's a lot of legalities. We got to go through the consulate of that country, and to send someone back is just as complicated, and it's a process that you go through. So.
There was a state that got my attention because I thought we all had a problem whether we might be out of state.
Right, as much as folks are, we're such a, I guess, a transit type folks now. Yeah, no, it's not like it was 40, 50 years ago. Everybody pretty much didn't get too far out of out of where you're from. So, but
Jordan, you have a question?
Yeah, the death certificate side of the house, do y'all deal with that?
yes, sir. We initiate the death certificate. When we sit down with the family, we gather the pertinent information, and it mirrors the birth certificate. And the death certificate is filed in the state of where the death occurs. So ours go through DHEC, which is vital records, and we go enter the biographical information in their portal, and then the physician or the medical examiner or the coroner has access to that document, and they complete the cause, and then it's filed with the vital records at the health department.
Kind of follow up on that, is there a number of those that would be available that we would need to have during going through if you're the executor or something like that? And what is that normally, and do we come back to y'all to get those?
We make daily trips basically to the health department. So we do it as a convenience, not to say that you couldn't go. We always tell families most need anywhere from 8 to 12, and there's not much administratively you can do without it. If there's any property that needs to be probated, life insurance, to file a claim, you'd need a certified death certificate. If investments, if you have a bank account and it's just in the deceased name, if it's joint account, then you shouldn't have a problem. But if it's in their name solely, then you would need a certified copy. So We always tell families, if you think you need 5 or 6, you may want to get 8 or 10. Some folks will take a photocopy, but most need a certified copy. And the state charges $17 like for the first copy, and then $3 for each additional. But if you have to go back, it's $17, you know. So it's good to get them all up front. But yeah, that is a vital document to handle any administrative affairs.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, John.
Very much
Yeah,
for
appreciate that. Thank
sharing.
you.
And
Yeah.
he'll be around, so if there are other questions you think about before we're finished tonight, I'm sure he'll love to help you answer them. You know, we find ourselves at a funeral at the intersection of faith, a sense of our own mortality, but also the sense of hopefulness, right, as Christian people. So we don't pretend that death is easy, but we do not grieve as those without no hope. I think that is the chief job of the proclaimer at a funeral, is to speak to that hope. Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, but he also promised resurrection. And our funerals are places where we can show up both to lament, but also to be reminded of the hope we have in Christ. So this idea of planning your funeral ahead of time is not giving up. It's not saying, well, it's right around the corner, I might as well get this done. That's not the sense. It is the sense that you're giving forward to family and to others, right? Psalm 116:15 says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants." And I think it's good for us all to think about what we would want others to remember about our life and faith. I've told the story, I think, in a sermon about Alfred Nobel's obituary and him being mistaken. His brother passed away, him being mistaken and being called all kinds of names, and he wanted to be remembered differently. And so it changed his life and changed the Nobel Peace Prize. So we need to ask ourselves that very same question. What do we want others to remember about us? And frankly, our job is to plan in practical ways so that folks know it. So, thinking about all of these things, we've already talked about some, but practical things to think about: medical wishes, advance directives, we talked about it last week, is health care power of attorney. Those are important things to have in place. And then funeral preferences, whether you want burial, full body burial, cremation, where and who you want to participate, what scriptures do you want read, what songs do you want sung. And if songs matter, then place might have to change, and if the place matters, then songs might have to change, because we're not going to let you play Luther Vandross at a funeral in First Baptist Sanctuary. You know, so those are the things that we always help our families navigate. So those are things. And then the spiritual message that you want to send, hymns that make a difference. Do you have a life verse? Is there a verse that you've been guided by? Do you want that read? And what story do you want told? Obviously, I want to be able to write funerals and tell the stories, but I know as a preacher, when I sit down, my job is to speak to the hope that we all need, the reminder of hope that we all need, but also I think it's my job so that you won't recognize the person I'm talking about. talking about somebody else. That's not the Bible. Right? I mean, our job is to understand and be real. I mean, we're real people. And, you know, my wife's texting me right now, locked out of the house, and I'm going to go home, and it's going to be a terrible night for all of us. So, I mean, it's those types of things. Jennifer knows who I am. If people say nothing but great things about me at my funeral, she's going to be like, y'all didn't know him that night I got locked out of the house. Anyway, what is the faith legacy? And then, what is your plan? Where do you need to store it? Who should know where it is? These are functional questions. So I want you to think about this. What is one step I need to take this month about these decisions? Who needs to know my wishes? And what message of faith or blessing will I want spoken at my funeral? It may be that you want to make sure you want a specific word. Share those things with the folks who will help as you grow, as you get closer to and think about the ways in which you want your funeral to happen. So again, I have a document. There are 25 sets, and I can produce more if we run out. But this is basically the funeral or memorial service pre-arrangement form at First Baptist Church. The idea is that you would think about what you want done at your funeral. It's going to ask a lot of the vital records questions that Steve and those would need for death certificates, but it's also going to ask about whether you want a personal meeting with the pastor to talk through. Are there special memories you have about First Baptist Church that you want shared? This is specific to us, right? Where you want visitation to happen, you want it before the funeral, the day of, before, after the service. I mean, all the questions are in here. And then my request is that you would potentially trust either us or the funeral home of your choice with this information, right? We have a few on file already, and what I'm asking Keith and Lauren to help me with is creating hard files, but then also an Excel spreadsheet to say, oh yeah, John Uldrick does have something on file. We need to go to and look and pull it so that we can hand it to Jennifer. John, when you go meet with the Uldricks, take this because this is what Mr. Uldrick wanted. And boy, if I were to walk in to Blythe and sit down and say, this is exactly what your dad wanted. What a gift, right? What a gift. I would encourage you all to consider filling this out and turning it back into the church. You got it? I can have it as a Microsoft Word document, but I would be happy to email to anyone who wants a copy. Yep. So, any questions for me before we close? Thank y'all for being here. Don't forget to take one of these and hear these words as we depart. May you live fully. May you love deeply. And may you prepare wisely. So that even in death, your life will speak of God's